Welcome to Quiz Cues. This is exciting. Are you ready for something new? This is the first edition of Who Said It? Can you guess? 36 famous speakers from a quote, an image, and multiple choices. If you like these quizzes and want to see more, please subscribe. It encourages me to continuously create new content for your enjoyment. Thank you. Are you ready? Let's go! Who said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself"? A correct guess now scores 5 points. A correct guess based on the quote and image scores 3 points. A correct guess from the multiple choices scores 1 point. Franklin D. Roosevelt. He delivered this line during his first inaugural address on March 4, 1933, at the height of the Great Depression. The phrase was crafted by speechwriter Louis Howe, though Roosevelt edited and approved the final wording. Who said, "I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat"? Winston Churchill. He delivered these words to the House of Commons on May 13, 1940, just 3 days after becoming Prime Minister. The speech warned of the hard road ahead and rallied Parliament to support his war government at Britain's darkest hour. Who said, "The time is always right to do what is right"? Martin Luther King Jr. He included this line in a 1964 address to Oberlin College students, urging moral action regardless of circumstance. The quote has since become one of the most widely shared lines from his lesser-known campus speeches. Who said, "407 years ago our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty"? Abraham Lincoln. He delivered these opening words at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on November 19, 1863. The entire speech lasted barely 2 minutes, yet it redefined the war's purpose as a fight for human equality rather than mere Union preservation. Who said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them"? Maya Angelou. She published this line in her 2008 book Letter to My Daughter, a collection of essays reflecting on her life and the wisdom she hoped to pass on. The sentiment emerged from her belief that personal agency, not circumstance, defined a person's character. Who said, "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect"? Mark Twain. He recorded this observation in a 1904 notebook, though it was not published until after his death. The sentiment reflected his lifelong skepticism of popular opinion and his belief that the crowd was often wrong. Who said, "Be kind whenever possible. It is always possible"? Dalai Lama. He has repeated this teaching throughout his public appearances since the 1980s, making it one of the most consistent messages of his decades-long ministry. The line distills the Tibetan Buddhist practice of compassion into a simple, universally accessible instruction. Who said, "I can resist everything except temptation"? Oscar Wilde. He wrote this line for the character Lord Darlington in his 1892 play Lady Windermere's Fan. The witticism became one of his most quoted lines, perfectly capturing his philosophy that indulgence was a virtue to be embraced rather than suppressed. Who said, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams"? Eleanor Roosevelt. She recorded this sentiment in her 1960 book You Learn by Living, written at age 76. The line emerged from her belief that she did not truly come into her own until after her husband's death, when she discovered her independent public voice. Who said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not"? Robert F. Kennedy. He delivered these words in a 1968 campaign speech at the University of Kansas, adapting a line originally written by George Bernard Shaw. The speech outlined his vision for redirecting wartime spending toward domestic poverty programs. Who said, "Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known"? Carl Sagan. He wrote this line in his 1980 book Cosmos, accompanying the first television series to bring astronomy into American living rooms. The phrase captured his lifelong mission to make science feel like discovery rather than memorization. Who said, "My humanity is bound up in yours, for we can only be human together"? Desmond Tutu. He spoke these words throughout his anti-apartheid sermons in the 1980s, drawing on the African philosophy of Ubuntu. The concept holds that a person becomes fully human only through their relationship with other people. Who said a girl should be two things, classy and fabulous? Coco Chanel. She included this declaration in multiple interviews during the 1950s, when her fashion empire had already reshaped how women dressed worldwide. The line defined her personal design philosophy: elegance without pretension, sophistication without stuffiness. Who said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far"? Theodore Roosevelt. He first used this phrase in a 1901 address at the Minnesota State Fair, attributing it to a West African proverb he had long admired. The philosophy guided his foreign policy approach: negotiation backed by unmistakable military readiness. Who said, "Two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the universe"? Albert Einstein. He is widely credited with this observation, which appeared in a 1969 collection of his quotable remarks. The precise wording has been debated by scholars, but its attribution to him has been broadly accepted for over half a century. Who said, "Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up"? Thomas Edison. He shared this reflection in an 1877 interview, drawing on decades of persistent experimentation. The sentiment directly informed his approach to the light bulb, which required over 1,000 attempts before achieving practical illumination. Who said, "Wars may be fought with weapons, but they are won by men"? George S. Patton. He included this line in a 1944 speech to the Third Army before the Allied invasion of Normandy, emphasizing that leadership and morale mattered more than materiel. The address became legendary within military circles for its raw motivational power. Who said, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger"? Friedrich Nietzsche. He wrote this line in his 1888 philosophical work, Twilight of the Idols. Section 8, titled Maxims and Arrows, the aphorism has since become one of philosophy's most borrowed lines, appearing in music, films, and motivational speeches worldwide. Who said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment"? Ralph Waldo Emerson. He published this observation in his 1841 essay Self-Reliance, a cornerstone of American transcendentalist thought. The essay urged readers to trust their inner voice over societal expectations, a radical idea in an era of rigid conformity. Who said, "Duty, honor, country, those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be"? Douglas MacArthur. He delivered these words in his farewell address to the Corps of Cadets at West Point on May 12, 1962. The speech, given at age 82, summed up his 50-year military career and became known as one of the greatest addresses in American history. Who said, "Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can"? George Washington Carver. He shared this practical philosophy in a 1940s radio address aimed at encouraging rural farmers during the Great Depression. The advice reflected his own journey from a Missouri farm to becoming one of America's most influential agricultural scientists. Who said, "Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything"? George Bernard Shaw. He published this line in the 1911 preface to his play The Showing Up of Blanco Posnet. The sentiment captured his lifelong belief that intellectual flexibility was the mark of a truly thinking person, not stubborn consistency. Who said, "Show me a hero and I will write you a tragedy"? F. Scott Fitzgerald. He included this observation in his 1922 short story collection Tales of the Jazz Age. The line served as a personal motto, reflecting his belief that ambition and glamour inevitably carried the seeds of destruction. Who said, "The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go"? Dr. Seuss. He published these words in his 1978 book, I Can Read With My Eyes Shut, one of his many works encouraging literacy among young readers. The book was part of the beginner book series he created to make reading fun for children. Who said, "Let me tell you the one thing I have against Moses. He took us 40 years through the desert in order to bring us to the one place in the Middle East that has no oil." Golda Meir. She delivered this line in a 1973 interview, using dry humor to comment on the ironies of Jewish history and the geographic fate of Israel. The remark became one of her most quoted lines, capturing the self-deprecating wit that defined her public persona. Who said, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king"? Queen Elizabeth I. She delivered these words to her troops at Tilbury on August 9, 1588, as the Spanish Armada threatened invasion. The speech rallied her forces by framing her physical limitations as irrelevant to her capacity for leadership. Who said, "Leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because he wants to do it"? Dwight D. Eisenhower. He published this definition in a 1965 Reader's Digest article drawing on his experience as Supreme Allied Commander during World War II. The philosophy shaped his presidential approach to building consensus rather than issuing commands. Who said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction"? Ronald Reagan. He delivered these words during his 1967 gubernatorial inauguration in Sacramento, years before entering the White House. The line became a defining statement of his belief that liberty requires active defense by each passing generation. Who said, "We must restore hope to young people, help the old, be open to the future, spread love"? Pope Francis. He shared this sentiment early in his papacy, reflecting the pastoral priorities that would define his tenure. The line captures his insistence that the Church's mission centers on compassion for the marginalized rather than institutional preservation. Who said, "Someone is sitting in the shade today because someone planted a tree a long time ago"? Warren Buffett. He shared this observation in a 1991 letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders, explaining the value of long-term thinking over quarterly gains. The metaphor perfectly encapsulates his investment philosophy of patient capital appreciation. Who said you cannot shake hands with a clenched fist? Indira Gandhi. She offered this observation during a 1971 address at the United Nations General Assembly, amid rising tensions in South Asia. The line reflected her diplomatic philosophy that genuine peace requires open-handed generosity rather than guarded suspicion. Who said, "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing"? Helen Keller. She published these words in her 1940 book, Let Us Have Faith, written at age 59. The line emerged from her belief that her deafness and blindness were not disabilities but simply the conditions through which she experienced life's richness. Who said, "We are part of this universe. We are in this universe." But perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He delivered these words during a 2011 testimony before the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, advocating for NASA funding. The line reflects his lifelong mission to make viewers feel personally connected to cosmic phenomena. Who said, "The only time to eat diet food is while you're waiting for the steak to cook"? Julia Child. She shared this culinary philosophy during her 1970s television program, The French Chef, while demonstrating classic French techniques to American home cooks. The line perfectly captured her conviction that pleasure, not restriction, should guide the kitchen. Who said, "Those who dare to fail miserably can achieve greatly"? John F. Kennedy. He spoke these words during a 1961 address, encouraging students to embrace risk in pursuit of meaningful goals. The line came just months into his presidency when his own ambitious agenda carried enormous political risk. Who said, "Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room"? Jeff Bezos. He shared this business insight during a 2009 interview, reflecting on 2 decades of building Amazon into a household name. The line emerged from his belief that reputation is built through consistent customer experience rather than advertising campaigns. Did you keep track of your score? Post it in the comments. Thanks for playing Who Said It? See you in the next game.